Will Tesla and electric car movement actually make it, or this is just going to be kind of a fashion trend that goes away? Maybe it will just stay around as a niche for a very select few, or is this really the time for this whole electric car revolution to happen? The only reason I'm really even wondering this week is because Tesla, the leader of this movement, had a pretty tough week, and I have a perfect guest to talk about it to you guys today. So we're gonna do it all in just a few seconds.
Taking over the world, electrifying the world, electric.
All right, so last time I have James Cook on my show, so I'm going to have another person from across the pond here, another European accent for you guys to enjoy. And by the way, if this is your first time here, please don't forget to join this community by clicking the subscribe button. All right, so my guest is Roger Atkins, and he is an electric car blogger on LinkedIn. I believe the largest electric car blogger on LinkedIn, which means tons of brand executives read and follow his opinion and his posts. He's also a brand consultant for a lot of different popular car brands, especially electric car brands like Rimac, Shanghai Automotive, and Paris Electric. So without further ado, I'm gonna welcome Roger to the show. Roger, welcome.
Hi, Alex. Hi, everybody. Fantastic. Thank you for inviting me onto your show. That's very kind of you, and I'm looking forward to having an interesting chat.
Absolutely, man, and I'm glad that it just kind of turned out that this is the topic we're going to discuss, as this is turning out to be a pretty tough week for Tesla. And listen, they had that accident that today turns out that the guy was using Autopilot right before he crashed and died just a few miles away from here. The stock is on a 52-week low. They're having problems meeting their own deadline and the Model 3 production ramp up for the end of Q1, and also one of the chief investor officers, one of the hedge funds, predicting a bankruptcy of Tesla in a few months. What do you make out of all of this? Do you think there's something to worry about, or are we just in a bad stretch of 10 days or so?
Okay, I mean, it's a really important question because these are big companies. There are lots of people employed in them, and it's part of, as you say, a revolution. I think it's important just to sort of take stock of a few pieces of the jigsaw, as it were. So take electric vehicles as such. There's no doubt in my mind now that we are on a momentum. There is a process, there is a program around the world, especially in China, around switching to electrification rather than using petrol and diesel engines. Why is that so? It's because it's more efficient. It's because it's zero tailpipe emissions. And I stress zero tailpipe because, of course, the production of energy is still around the world, mostly fossil fuel. But that's changing, and that journey is rapidly changing in the switch to renewables. And so it makes sense to start to build the mobility world around electric vehicles. So the momentum's there, Alex, without any shadow of doubt in my mind, 100% certain. Let's take Tesla specifically. It's still a startup against people that have been around for over a century. Tesla's the new kid on the block. They've been going since what, 2005, 2006?
We just celebrated 10-year anniversary of the very first Roadster being produced.
Yeah, I remember being driven in one in Amsterdam by a guy called Peter Bakker, who ran a big company called TNT. He was one of the first people in Europe to have one, and it was a revelation to people. He was a great advocate for it, and I've kind of shared the journey in terms of what I've done over that decade. I've been in 3 startups, by the way. I worked for Richard Branson with Virgin Cars a long time ago. That was back in 2000. But Modec was a zero-emission electric van company. It came over to America through Navistar, with the Navistar E-Star for a while. But it didn't succeed. It eventually failed. That is what happens with startups from time to time. And also a high-speed amphibious business, which was called Gibbs, still is called Gibbs. That's gone on to be very successful. As it happens, Richard Branson drove a car across the English Channel, which was quite crazy and exciting. Which brings me on to my point about Tesla. It's a crazy company. The guy who runs it is crazy. But you've got to be crazy to try and change the world. Apple ran an advert some years ago about, the people who are the disruptors, the people that were brave and who changed things, and they take massive risks. To be frank with you, my opinion on Tesla at the moment is, yeah, they have some serious issues on a number of fronts. But I think, the fact that they took so many orders so quickly for the Model 3, and then I think, and this is going to sound a bit critical of Elon, he is perhaps quite micromanagement in his style, and it triggers a lot of what they call running changes, engineering changes on a product. And if you get too many of those coming together, all manufacturers have them, by the way, but if you get too many as you're preparing for a model launch, it backs up into the supply chain. It makes it difficult to people to keep on top of things. And then you start to get multiple delays in the supply chain, which means you can't finish vehicles at end of production line. And that's clearly what's been happening. Well, from what we know, that appears to have been what's happening at Tesla. There are people saying all sorts of things about the business. My own sense of things, having worked in a big manufacturer for 10 years and having been in automotive for 30 odd, is that there needs to be a change. And dare I say this, because I know you might not agree, Alex, and maybe a lot of your viewers won't. I think maybe it's a time for Elon to become the chairman of the company and take a lot less of a hands-on role. He's doing an amazing job with SpaceX, and I'm sure that's where his kind of true passion is, certainly where his skill sits. And I think in some senses it would work better for SpaceX if he spent more time there operationally, and it would be really good for Tesla and the shareholders, and I think the employees, to bring in, I can think of one or two people, but bring in the appropriate CEO to actually run the business a bit more like a traditional automotive manufacturer, because that's kind of what they're becoming. Lots of supply chain, lots of challenges, lots of volume, which is wonderful.
So wait a second, am I hearing this correctly? You think that Tesla might be better off without Elon Musk as their CEO? I mean, this is definitely a very uncommon opinion, and also he just got a 10-year extension, if you will. And by the way, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think that his Twitter storms and his 1,000 different projects at the same time, and the way that he kind of promises things and doesn't really deliver on time, I think this is all relatively hurtful to the company, any company really, but especially a company that's young and really doesn't have that much time to or room to make mistakes. So are you saying that he should step down? If so, who would take over? Because let's remember that most of the stuff that Tesla is known for, and just like Steve Jobs, half of the worth of the stock price right now is Elon Musk. So do you really mean it? And if so, who would take over?
Yeah, well, you make a great comparison there, Alex. Steve Jobs, as I'm sure you know, essentially got fired from Apple and then came back again. And it would be quite weird for pretty much the same thing to happen. But I could see that. I could see that in the short and medium term, they bring in a really high, powered, senior, well-experienced executive to help run the facility and undo some of the challenges that they've got, and concentrate 100% on that 7 days a week. Not be juggling and jumping around the other stuff that Elon does. And yeah, I think that is the time. Listen, trust me, I have a huge amount of massive admiration for Elon Musk. My kids growing up used to call me, they used to say I had a man crush on Elon Musk, because, there used to be two people. First of all, it was Shah Agassi, because I loved the whole battery swap proposition. Then it became Elon Musk. But yeah, I'm a huge admirer of them. I'd hate to see Elon get ill. I'd hate to see this crush him. I'd hate for it to be, the very thing that he's created, for it to fall over. That would be nuts. So I'm not saying I don't believe in Tesla. I'm saying I think they've got some fundamentally massive problems that I don't think Elon necessarily can fix.
Okay, but who takes over? Let's say everybody agrees with you and he's out. Who takes over?
Okay, well, I mean, I can't give you a kind of list of candidates as such, but to give you an example of the type of person, years ago, I worked for a guy called Len Hunt, who ran Audi in the UK and then built the business around what they call brand separation, where Audi became, it used to be very much part of Volkswagen, became its own brand, got its own dealers, had its own identity, more and more and more. He then came to America and did that. And how did he do that? Why did he do that? Really good leader, very strong, very focused, very, much a question of building up the team and making the management team the business of what you're doing, not the individuals. Tesla is too much about Elon Musk when Tesla should be about, the whole company. And I don't just mean the top management team, but they drive it, they shape it, they set the example. So they do have to be right at the top of the tree. But, everybody's got to be on their game. I suspect the people at Tesla are exhausted, working flat out, probably a little bit, well, certainly this week, because they all have stock, don't they? They all have part of their remuneration is in stock, concerned or worried or whatever. But I think you've got to be pragmatic. Do I think Tesla's a basket case and they're finished? No. Do I think they need to change some things radically? Yes. And right at the top of that list is for Elon to choose to move across, not get fired like Steve Jobs did. That would be sad. That wouldn't be a good thing.
Agreed.
So that's my sense of it.
Okay, so sorry to interrupt, but I'm still trying to figure out. Okay, with all of that said, and I agree with a lot of this. I mean, I've been pretty critical of him. I think he's spread thin. I think he's done a lot of disservice to the company while being the front man and sort of the face of the brand. But okay, now let's kind of come down and see what the current situation is right now, because we are looking at the company that's just about to do Q1 end results, and they're going to miss their production goals for the Model 3. They're this is make it or break it type of the model car for them. And this is the third time that they've kind of set their own goals. This autopilot thing is a disaster. I mean, obviously Uber self-driving incident didn't have much to do with them, but that, in addition to that accident, that again, they just revealed that it was an autopilot here in Mountain View. I mean, I know the investigation is going to be long, but nevertheless, it's not good. Plus, this reports coming out that a lot of money due back at the end of this year for Tesla, and if they're not ramping this thing up, they might end up having to borrow more and more money. Their rating is decreasing for their debt. How do they manage this for the rest of the year? What should Elon Musk do for the rest of the year to manage this, to ramp up the production? What should he say at the Q1 and whatever the media interviews that he does and the report to get back on track and to actually make sure that there is a future for the company?
Well, I think if it was any other company and the head of that company had another job, so basically his part-time role with the massive challenges that they've got, he should, like I say, move over, bring in someone for a period of time that he works alongside with, and then take role as chairman or something like that, and allow somebody to basically restructure what they do, how they do it, and equally be the voice for that. Because, Elon is his own man and he has his style, and he's bound to, talk in the way that he does. And inevitably, I wouldn't say exaggerate, but, well, some would, accentuate the positives perhaps a bit too much. And I think he kind of, if you're an ice cream guy, you've got to make plain vanilla first. If you want to sell all the other fruity flavors, chocolate, tutti frutti, fine, do that, but make plain vanilla first. And I think the mistake here is that, I'd go back to Model X. Model X didn't need gull wing doors. The whole strategy of Tesla, plan one, game one, is to accelerate the adoption of low carbon vehicle technologies or electric vehicles. That doesn't include gull wing doors. So someone somewhere at a certain point should have said, Elon, forget it. Let's just make, a car that works, an SUV, that's what people want. So along the way, and I don't want to go through and pick the faults as such. I know I just did, but all I'm saying is to answer your question, we need someone in sooner rather than later. They need to have a period of transition take over. They've got to be a very strong individual, man or woman. They've got to be a very strong character, because Elon clearly is. And within the next 3 to 6 months, someone else needs to be in charge of that company, period.
Okay, so you're saying that really number one priority for the company is to change their CEOs. And I hear you, but it's probably not going to happen because the board just approved them. It doesn't look like there's, things change very quickly, but let's assume he stays as a CEO. What does he have to do to get to this? Like, for example, does he come out in the next few days when he's doing a report and answering questions, say, listen, we screwed up. We now have this particular plan on how we're going to ramp up the production, and this is why I'm predicting this number. I'm not pulling it out of my butt like before. This is what we're going to do, and this is a backup plan. And this is what, if we don't meet the number that we need to pay off our loans, this is what we're going to offer as a backup a plan, and this is why it's going to work? Or does he continue saying, yeah, everything's great, we're definitely going to meet our numbers next time around, and kind of continue on with this hype type of a deal? Or what does he do? What does he say in the next few days, in the next month? And don't forget, there's still this autopilot that he needs to comment on. I'm sure people will ask him about that.
Yeah.
What does he do?
Well, bear in mind that the makeup of the shareholding is that it's not like there are hundreds of thousands of big shareholders. There are lots of shareholders that are employees, several shareholders that hold a big chunk of equity. So, and Elon's one of those, of course. So in a sense, it's a relatively small number of people that influence the share price going up and down. And I think there's the rub. In fairness to Elon Musk, he's never said the company's worth 30, 40, 50, 60 billion dollars. That's come about through people sensing that it isn't just a car company. It's an energy company. It's a business to do with the new world of mobility, connected vehicles, shared vehicles, etc. So, the valuation of the vehicle is in future prospects. And I think when the future prospects, for example, on autonomous vehicles and therefore shared vehicles diminishes because of accidents, that knocks down the share price. So the share price fall of nearly $100 over the last few weeks is a combination of not getting the Model 3 out, worrying about cash burn, and also the fact that future value was predicated on something that might be slower to arrive, i.e. connected, autonomous, shared, and electric, than people were suggesting. To be fair to Elon, he's never said the company's worth the money it is today. That's kind of been, jumped up by other people, Adam Jonas and various other kind of people on Wall Street. The very same people now, of course, that are knocking it back to, a 200 share price projection or $150 or whatever. To a certain extent, that doesn't matter, but it does matter when it comes to borrowing money, because it's easier and the money costs you less to borrow it when the valuation of the company is higher. Now, Alex, I'm not pretending to understand that well because I'm not a finance guy, but you know the basics and I know the basics. So to answer your question, they definitely need to do something different. We can't keep saying, jam, as an expression we use in England, jam tomorrow. You can't keep saying jam tomorrow. Sometimes you have to, eventually you have to give the jam, you've got to show the stuff. But this isn't all in Elon's control. It isn't all in Tesla's control. You mentioned Uber, you mentioned other things that have happened. So, one accident in an autonomous vehicle becomes world news. One accident and a death happens every few hours in the world in other vehicles, but it's not news anymore because we accept it. It's kind of part of life, and death. But right now, for everything that we're saying about driverless vehicles, we're bound to get this kind of backlash, if you want to call it that. And that's now one of the other things impacting on Tesla. So that's why I don't think the whole thing is like, game over. I think Tesla are in the toughest time they've ever been because of all the things, we've just been talking about for the last, 15 minutes.
So okay, now granted, and I'm really anxious to see what's going to happen. I really think they can navigate through this, but let's switch this focus a little bit. James Cook, the guest who was on my show last week, he one of the best headlines that I've seen for a YouTube video lately in this, at least in this niche. He titled his video "The Greatest Tesla Achievement: The Jaguar I-Pace." And as we probably can all admit that, Tesla has kind of dragged the entire industry into, not falling in love, but definitely, making electric cars and being serious about it. Let's talk about those companies. Jaguar obviously just came up with I-Pace. Waymo is now partnering up. They're ordering over 20,000 of them to create self-driving cars. This is the car that's here in about half a year. This is not a concept or anything like that. Talk to me about Jaguar I-Pace and other brands. Do you think they are? First of all, do you think that they're really pushed into this by Tesla? And so how serious do you think they are? And do you think one of them has a chance to take over Tesla one day, like Android took over an iPhone? What are your thoughts?
That's some great questions, Alex. These are the key questions as to where we are. On the one hand, you've got startups who've got no legacy issue. They only do electric vehicles and they struggle because they're new, just like Tesla, but other companies too, because they've got to start from scratch. They've got to build the market. And the market is very much about connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. It isn't just electric. And that world is being developed as we speak. So to gain the revenue from that, to make the investment in technology or work and all of that stuff takes time. That's the struggle. What they call incumbents, these existing companies you're talking about, are they serious? Without doubt, if Tesla hadn't done what they've done and Elon and all the rest of them hadn't been who they were these past 10 years, no, we wouldn't be seeing these things. Absolutely not. So they've definitely triggered it. The advantage that these companies have, like Jaguar Land Rover, like Daimler, like Shang Automotive, or any of the companies around the world in Asia, Europe, America, is they make money now out of selling the traditional stuff. You and I might not, want to drive a petrol or diesel car anymore, but 99% of the world's population do. And when they do, it creates revenue for those companies. They can then spend that money on research and development and design to bring in this product like Jaguar have just done with the I-Pace. What do I think about that vehicle? I really like it. A few things I would like a bit different, but that's just me personally. But as a product, I think they've tested and validated amazingly well. I think they've hugely focused on the battery, as you obviously would in an electric vehicle, in terms of how to manage it in performance, how to manage it in servicing, and how to manage it even at end of life. Even though they've just launched it, I think they're putting all of these component parts together incredibly well. I think this is triggered by Tesla for sure. The challenge for Tesla is that people switch across to those brands and those cars. But the one thing that I would still always hold out as the ace in the pack for Tesla is that they deliver a charging proposition. They come to market with not just a product, but here's a supercharge network. This is how we'll help you plug it in. No one else has done that. Jaguar haven't, Daimler haven't, Audi haven't, General Motors haven't, Ford haven't. Well, there's no point going through a list because none of them have. So what I think is more interesting now is where does Jaguar and the other companies go in terms of the charging proposition? Because for me, that's always been the Achilles heel of everyone else and not Tesla. Hats off to Tesla for the whole thing of approaching the market with the charging proposition and the product. So I don't know if that answers your question, Alex, because it was a bit of a long answer, but that's what I think.
Well, so, and that's really like the next topic that I wanted to talk about, because charging is extremely important. And by the way, before I move on, I completely forgot that. Should mention that this show is sponsored by Evanex, which is the the aftermarket accessories for Tesla. If you guys are looking to shop there, please check out the discount code in the description of this video. They've created it specific for our community, so check it out. All right, so let's continue our conversation. And you mentioned the supercharging network. Now, this to me and to a lot of people is probably the biggest feature of the car for Tesla, which is not inside the car, which is kind of weird. And I have 2 Teslas myself, and the both of them leases are coming to an end in another 6 months or so. And I have to say that I am struggling to figure out what I want to get next. Do I want to get another Tesla, or do I actually want to go with the Jaguar I-Pace on others? And to me, the fact that I won't be able to supercharge is a big deal.
Yep.
The question that I have. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's the thing. The first time, I'm lucky enough to have met Elon a couple of times. The first time I met him, I asked a question: would wireless charging or battery swapping or fast charging all kind of work together, or will one of those things ultimately be the solution? And he's always very polite when he answers questions publicly. Maybe it's harder if you work for him. And he said he thought fast charging and supercharging was the thing that would dominate. He said that battery swapping would be something he would want to do and to give customers if they wanted it. But his sense was that wouldn't happen. And wireless charging, he felt, was on a very long lead time in terms of, coming to market with it as a solution, especially for high power, anything from, say, 50 kilowatts up, maybe 100, even 200 kilowatts. So I think that, the supercharger network works really, really well. It's cost them a ton of money to do it. But like you say, it's even with you now creating this kind of degree of loyalty, because you understand how it works. You don't necessarily have to use it every day, but it's there, and it gives you that confidence to get around in your electric car wherever you want to go, short haul or long haul. Battery swapping and wireless charging, they're things I know a reasonable bit about. I've always been a believer and a huge admirer of, as I mentioned earlier, Shai Agassi and battery swap. Well, look, everyone says it, $1 billion down the toilet and it failed and the guy didn't know what he was doing. Well, look at what's coming back. Battery swap is there with NIO in China with their new SUV. Battery swap, certainly for the same type of battery in big fleets of vehicles, does make sense. And wireless charging is about to, I think, pop up much more than people would have anticipated. There's a great company in America called Momentum Dynamics. They are delivering 200 kilowatt wireless charging on buses on the streets of America now. I mean, that's astonishing. That's a huge amount of power very quickly. So I think the missing, won't call it missing link, no, I nearly did. It is the missing link to electric vehicle mass adoption is how charging works, both cabled, wireless, and even swap. And I think Tesla have led the way on that massively. And I'm still quite surprised, sort of shocked really, no pun intended there, that other OEMs haven't either partnered with Elon, with the supercharger network, or brought something to market. They talk about it a lot. You don't see anything delivered.
Well, so let's talk about it, because I mean, there is a few fast charging networks that have been at least started and launched in Europe. One of them is Ionity, and almost all of them have been invested by the main brands that have electric cars coming out. Ionity has been invested by Daimler, BMW, Ford, and Volkswagen Group, which also is, of course, Porsche and Audi. And they're looks like they're pretty serious about it. They're looking to build 400 locations by 2020, which is kind of when their cars, the investors' cars, the BMWs and Audis and so forth, are kind of start taking over in Europe. Do you think that they can actually catch up to Tesla? I'm always doing Android, versus iPhone comparison. Do you think it can catch up in the next few years? And also, what would need to happen in the United States for it? But let's talk about Ionity and the rest of them. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think partnerships are the way forward, without a doubt. You're starting to see people recently Daimler and BMW joined forces with some of their car sharing programs, because I think they realized that if the traditional industry don't want to get swamped by either the new kids on the block or even some of the kind of internet companies, people in China like Tencent or Baidu, or even, let's say, closer to home, your kind of neck of the woods, Apple or Google or wherever, they can't do it on their own. They have to join forces. They have to collaborate more than they've ever collaborated before. So I think that's definitely what we're starting to see. I think it was also interesting that Geely bought a 10% stake in Daimler a few weeks ago. And that was interesting in itself, but was more interesting, I think, was that the chairman of Geely, Li Shufu, said that this is what the industry had to do. The traditional, he called it, auto industry needs to collaborate with each other to bring this technology faster to market, including charging, as well as products and business models, because otherwise they would get overtaken by the new kids on the block and they would find themselves, potentially without a business. So will this stuff happen? Yeah, I kind of, having been around, I'm probably just an old bloke now and just get too impatient. I get a bit bored of hearing about concepts and plans and by 20 something this, something the other. I like it when people do stuff. That's the huge attraction always with Elon, is he says we're going to send the biggest rocket up into space and bung a model, a roadster in it. You think, no. And within a few months, 6 months, 9 months, he does it. He delivers on his promises. Yes, they're late sometimes, but the complexity behind his promises is just astonishing.
To be fair, that we should say that the Falcon Heavy, I believe it was 3 years delayed. So he delivered on that and everything else, but that one was also really delayed. So
yeah, but
just to be fair,
it was epic of that. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. You're right. I'm probably being a bit unfair in one sense, but the challenge here is that the big traditional players have to work out how they can switch horses midstream. That's the kind of situation. They've always made money out of selling petrol and diesel. Now they need to make money out of selling electric. They're not quite sure how to do that yet, and they're switching horses in the midstream. And that's kind of where we are. They look at the market and think, well, hang on, you guys, Alex, on YouTube, and Roger and all, Robert Llewellyn, all these people in different places bang on about electric vehicles all the time, but only 1%, roughly, maybe 2% of the world's population choose to buy an electric car at the moment. So what the hell are you shouting about? So you can understand them feeling nervous that if they switch all their business into that maybe the market isn't there yet. Personally, I think it is, especially with younger people. And I think the combination of connected, autonomous, and shared, that's the stuff that works with electric vehicles that will trigger the mass adoption, that will trigger this new market. I think on its own, just an electric vehicle versus a combustion engine vehicle, that's not the thing that makes the difference. It's this new thing of mobility that is the game changer. And I think they all get that. I think they do.
Okay, so this brings me to my kind of a last topic that I wanted to talk about, because it's kind of an elephant in the room, and it would be silly of us to have a conversation about whether or not this electric car was going to make it or not without talking about it, which is China. And I think a lot of people know, I just recently did a show when I was looking at the sales numbers and everything, and as I was looking up, even I've been also doing it for a while and keeping up with all the news and everything, and I was surprised that when I looked at all the numbers, the number one electric car, whatever if you look at the electric car and plug-in hybrids, that the number one car sold, the number one brand being sold selling those cars was a Chinese company, BYD. Number two brand was also Bike, another Chinese company. They have great incentives now for the manufacturers and for the buyers. They have a bunch of brands coming out there. You've already mentioned NIO. They're one of my favorites, I have to say, because of their technology of swapping batteries and so forth. We got a bunch of Chinese investments here in Faraday Future, Lucid Air, SF Motors just came out, and so many others. Do you think Chinese market can lead the way in the world, or do you think they're going to do very well there and with investments, but kind of stay separate? What do you think about this surprisingly big leader on the stage of electric cars?
Alex, I think this is a great note to finish on, to be honest with you, because yeah, I've said several times, either in blogs or meetings with people, reviews of meetings. This is all about China. The three big things that have happened in the last couple of years that have triggered this massive interest in EVs, which is slowly becoming a marketplace, is in this kind of order. Number one, Dieselgate, the whole kind of revelation of what combustion engine cars were really. Certainly in terms of where diesel technology was and Volkswagen were as a particular company. Number one. Number two, the order book for the Tesla Model 3. Whatever happens, that was a kind of giant wake-up call for the industry. They were shocked by that news. And the third big thing was quite recently. Last year, the Chinese government mandated that you will build as a manufacturer in China, joint venture, national company, whatever, a percentage of your production as plug-in. If you didn't, you couldn't, you were out of business. They shut you down. So they're forcing the market. Now,
I'm actually showing the image of Denza 500 because that is the latest joint venture product between Daimler and I believe Biati, right?
Yeah. Well, there's Beijing Automotive and there's Shanghai Automotive. They're the two kind of big national companies. But then there's lots of others like Geely, which is a private company, but obviously very much focused on what they're doing through the government. Chang'an, you can go through a list of companies. The fact is, it's the world's biggest population at this time. That will be India in a few years, of course. So the 1.4 billion population switching to electric vehicles is easier for them because they haven't had a 100-year history of the combustion engine vehicle. So the Chinese are looking to leapfrog a lot of Western technology, if I want to give it that phrase. They're essentially seeing the electric vehicle, but more importantly, connected, autonomous, and shared, as the way they become the leaders in all of this stuff. And I think they also focus, because I've always been keen on this, on commercial vehicles, not just passenger cars. So taxis, buses, and vans. I'm doing some work in Europe with Shanghai Automotive with an electric van, a 3.5-ton electric van. Now, pollution in cities where you have urban operating, defined mileage back to base vehicles. In China, you have some of these enormous cities with millions of people. There's tons of them. And the pollution, a lot of the pollution in the cities comes from taxis and buses and vans. So they're the things that, whether it's BAIC, SAIC, BYD, Chang'an, Geely, all of these companies are focusing both on commercial vehicles and passenger car,
Yeah. So and this is something that is for me has been kind of a surprise how fast China kind of caught up and how much progress they've made. Now a lot of people are saying, well, those cars are made in China, they're just for China, and you can't just bring them to California. They're not gonna comply to any of these regulations and so forth. But I have a feeling that either their investments in companies like Lucid and Fairdive Fusion and so forth, or their own homegrown technologies like NIO that are going to be, looks like, coming to America sometime soon in the next few years, actually going to make a big run for it. So I'm hopeful. You're right. This country, China, has to do this because they can't breathe, right? We can still breathe, but they really can't breathe, and this is why they got to do it. So I'm pretty much counting on China to lead the way, and it looks like their government is leading the way, where here in the United States, it's the private sector, mainly Tesla, that's leading the way. But nevertheless, slowly but surely, we're kind of crawling. And I know you're absolutely right. We're still at 1% of total sales a year. Let me ask you this: when do you think we'll get to 3 or 5 or 10 or 20%? How fast do you think we'll get there? And is it going to be a kind of a slow climb, or do you think it's just going to do a hockey stick type of the thing?
It's a great question. No one actually knows, of course, but there are plenty of opinions. So take one extreme opinion. Tony Sieber says it's hockey stick. He's an interesting guy, worth looking up. I don't know if you're familiar with his sort of structure of presentation and explanation. He definitely sees it as a hockey stick. So to answer your question, if it's Tony Sieber answering it, it would be we'd be at 5, 10, 50% within the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years. He could be right. Most people, a lot of people, especially people that are typically called experts, don't agree with him at all, but he could be right. Personally, I think, going back to my point, think to autonomy and sharing, and therefore once we're at a more mature point technically and in legislation of those things, that's when the EV kicks off. So I would put it around 2022, 23 because of the lead time around stuff to get to that point. And then I think it'd be hockey stick. So I think it'll sort of, come along. There's going to be a lot more choice within the next few years, hundreds of EVs, in fact. So we're 2018 now, halfway through almost, well, quarter of the way through. So yeah, I think it's another 2 or 3 years of kind of steady but slow growth. And then bang, 2023, 24, when autonomy and sharing really kick in, so does the electric vehicle. And then I think 10 years hence, at least 50%, if not 60% or more of vehicles will be plug-in of some sort, and maybe as many as a quarter or a third of those will be full battery electric vehicles.
And I hope you're right. Again, this is a tough week to talk about this, but I agree with you. I think we have a couple more years while the Tesla is still dragging everybody else in, while everyone's ramping up, while Tesla is still kind of growing and figuring out what's going to happen with the Model 3. But overall, I tend to agree. In a couple of years, and once more and more people see these cars, there's not enough people who have seen these cars. I think we're going to be fine. So interesting. Listen, we can probably talk for another couple of hours. I think I said it to all of my guests. My guests are always awesome. So thank you for being one of them. Why don't you tell my audience how they can follow you, where they can find you, for those of you who want to hear more of your opinions and just kind of follow you and what you do for the electric car movement.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, you can follow me on my website, which is electricvehiclesoutlook.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Just put Roger Atkins into the LinkedIn search and that'll pop up. Got a few followers on there. I've been sharing articles and thoughts for some time on that platform. So there's kind of effectively a library that you can hook into, going back to 100 and something articles. So something might be of interest in there. Also pop a few pictures up on Instagram. Again, Electric Vehicles Outlook is that tag. And as you've kindly said, Alex, I do a bit of blogging, but I also do some work for Psych, Shang Automotive. I'm a brand advocate, huge supporter of Rimac, and Paris Electric. Nobody knows about that yet, but trust me, they will. It's a 2-seater electric GT that's going to be racing around tracks, giving people some great experience of EV. So there's lots of things to come, and I'm very lucky in meeting and working with all sorts of people and trying to help them along the way, bring together lots of different elements of this stuff. I'm incredibly lucky. I love what I do. I enjoy what I do. I have fun doing it. So it's great to talk to you, because I know you have the same attitude and opinion, and I wish you well. And, I hope you get more and more followers as time goes on, because you put a lot of effort into this. You do it for nothing. You get a bit of sponsorship from a few companies, and you've got to do that. But I think your passion for it shows through. And I think I'd like more and more people to know what you do. You're fun, you're interesting, you occasionally say stuff that might make people think, what? But that's good. People want a bit of challenge, a bit of excitement, a bit of stuff that's different. So good.
I appreciate it. All right. Well, everything that you mentioned is in the description of this video, so you guys please check it out. I'm going to link to all of this social media links that Roger has. Roger, listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope to have you on at some point later this year to talk about hopefully how we're winning now, not during this tough week. But thank you so much. All right, guys, and I appreciate you guys watching this video. Of course, I'm going to have more guests in the upcoming week. We got Rich rebuilds that I know a lot of you guys are looking forward to. I'm going to cover the Tesla adventure in another 3 weeks, that we're going to go to the largest supercharger in America and drive to Ivy Beach. Zach and Jesse are coming on, and a lot of other exciting guests. I want to thank my guest, Roger Atkins, for being on the show. This is really exciting for me. I love having people like this who are veterans of the industry that know what they're talking about, and they're also passionate about it as well. So I will tomorrow, of course, don't forget, I'm gonna recap the entire week. We're gonna talk about the tough week that Tesla had, and hopefully look forward to the next week. So until tomorrow, 11 a.m. See you guys next time, and remember to stay charged.